The winners, the losers. My message to the losers: losers, look in the mirror. No? Well, maybe you should. Sorry. Well, that's my feeling. Losers, look in the mirror, okay? You know, yeah. I mean, for months, Democrats have been saying, how is this even close? And they're right, it wasn't. They could not conceive of a second Trump term, but they should have. When does America ever turn down second? I mean, come on.
It started on a day when everyone expected business as usual on The View. The hosts were laughing confident, tossing out their usual takes. But then something shifted. A guest walked in who wasn't there to be agreeable. He wasn't interested in smiling. And nodding or pretending their opinions were the only ones that mattered, he came to challenge everything.
They won. Now they have reality they have to deal with. You know, we'll see what they do. See if they live up to their word. Trump says he's going to deport 12 million people. How are you going to get 12 million people back into Mexico? And today Trump said, I'm way ahead of you. Why do you think I left so many holes in the wall?
The second he spoke, the air changed, tension filled the space. He went right for the core of the show's image. The so-called reputation of welcoming different views, he called it what it was. A place where only one side gets to speak freely. No soft landings, no sugarcoating. He accused the panel of pushing a one-sided script and made it clear if you don't agree, you're automatically seen as the enemy.
Kamala was on Saturday Night Live, as the losing candidate often is. It worked so well for Hillary. Let's run that back. And it just made me think, I'm sure every single member of the Saturday Night Live cast was a Harris supporter. But what if one of them wasn't? What if one of those cast members was for Trump? Would they have felt comfortable saying so? I really don't think so. They would have had to keep it to themselves. That's not a good place for us to be. I remember when, and that happens even more on the left. And I remember when Elon Musk hosted, and this is well before he was a Trumper. This is 3 or 4 years. He was just the richest man in the world. And a number of the cast members on Saturday Night Live, they didn't want to deal with him. They didn't exactly boycott, but they made it plain. And I was thinking, really? You have Elon Musk on your show for a week. You could talk to one of the most interesting, brilliant people the world has ever produced, even about this issue that bothers you so much, that he's so rich and lots of people aren't. But no, you don't want to even deal with him. That's what I hate about the left. You're brats. You're brats and you're snobs and people.
This wasn't just some vague criticism. He pointed straight at their intolerance for conservative political views, especially anything right-leaning.
Israel 5 times. They've started 5 wars since they were given that land back. They could have chosen to turn that place into any place they wanted to, and they took a lot of money that they took from the international community and they spent it on bombs and guns and building tunnels. So if they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? It's a war. I don't know how to do that, and you don't know how to do that. I assume the Israeli Of course, everybody is, but that's what happens in a war. Here's a way to stop that. Stop attacking Israel.
To him, the show wasn't about exchanging ideas. It was about repeating the same one endlessly, and that truth landed hard by the way. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow and deliver more of these moments.
Back to it.
Ira Glasser, former longtime head of the ACLU, talking about free speech. Whoopi Goldberg, who, by the way, I hope is still a friend. We can disagree with each other. Should not be canceled or put off her show, as much as I totally disagree with her crazy statement. Free speech. She should be there. She shouldn't get a timeout.
Not every single thing has to be for everybody.
Right.
We can have platforms that have stuff on them that not everyone on that platform or who consumes stuff on that platform enjoys. And The View is a particularly weird place to do a cancellation.
It's called The View?
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
Well,
that's the problem in America.
But
there is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the corner.
That's
Because things only got more awkward after that, after calling out the show's phony idea of thought diversity. He didn't ease up. He leaned in even more, looked into the camera, then out at the crowd, and said something that froze the room. Losers need to look in the mirror. It wasn't a generic jab. It was a direct hit at liberal media figures who still can't accept election results they don't like.
A very different opinion. And the answer is not to make them sit in a corner for 2 weeks. That is insulting. It's so insulting to make a 65-year-old, the person at ABC News said, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. Reflect. How insulting for someone of her age, who's a sophisticated person, and the impact of her comment. There is no impact. There aren't neo-Nazis waiting for the green light from a lady on The View to go out and do a new crystal knot.
So right. And the whole point of free speech is we don't need free speech when we're right, when everyone agrees with us. We need free speech when we're wrong. We need free speech to make mistakes. We need free speech to say really unpopular things. And one of the reasons I'm always proud to come on this show, and I suspect you feel the same way, Catherine, is this is the only space left on television where people can speak freely and not be terrified, right? And you have...
He brought up the outrage that followed Trump's popularity surge. The hosts on The View, like many others, couldn't grasp it, but instead of introspection or asking what they might have missed, they kept blaming others. That's what he called out. Then he delivered the punch. He compared their disbelief to a refusal to accept reality they never imagined. Trump would get another shot because they were trapped in their own echo chamber.
The whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me just ask, what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can. There's a lot
Hold on.
He said America rarely turns down a sequel, not in film and not in politics. And when he said it, the look on the hosts' faces said it all. They weren't ready for someone brave enough to say what half the country was thinking, and they definitely weren't prepared to hear they might be the ones running from the truth. And it got even sharper. The panel tried to regain control, so they turned to immigration. Hoping to corner him, they asked how Trump could deport millions of undocumented immigrants, expecting a slip-up or some hesitation. Instead, he came back with razor sarcasm. He said, "Trump's already ahead of you. Why do you think he left?" So many holes in the wall. The crowd lit up, but the hosts were stunned, unsure if they should laugh, argue, or ignore it. But he wasn't finished. He turned the heat on the broader liberal media, from late-night shows to celebrities and political voices. He tore into them for pretending to be bold, claiming they'd flee the country if Trump won, only to stay put and carry on like nothing changed. He called it fake staged outrage, and that's what hit the hardest. He was no longer just talking politics. He was unraveling a pattern loud. Virtue signals, moral smugness, and zero accountability. He wasn't playing their game, and it was clear they had no idea how to respond when someone hit back twice as hard. The View tried to box him in, but he flipped the script. The fire didn't stop there. He went after SNL and the culture it represents, one that claims to be free-thinking but demands conformity. He asked the question, no one dares, what if someone on the SNL cast liked Trump? Would they feel safe saying so? His answer, no chance. They'd be silenced. Not for hate speech, not for doing harm, but just for thinking differently. And that hit in a way that went beyond politics. It exposed fear of speaking, fear of exile from your own team. He even mentioned the Elon Musk backlash when he hosted SNL, not because he was right-wing, but just because he was wealthy. Cast members protested, refused to show up, and he called it what it was: childish, arrogant, and a wasted chance to engage with someone powerful just because of bias. Then he dropped the hammer. You're brats, you're snobs, and people are tired of it. The silence after that said everything. But then came the moment that truly shook The View. They brought up Middle East conflicts, maybe thinking they'd guide the conversation, but it went in a direction they never takes them. Expected, he went right into Israel, saying they had the right to defend themselves. He called out the misuse of aid, how it wasn't spent on the future, but on weapons, tunnels, and war. The View wasn't ready for that level of honesty, one host tried to argue, but he shut it down fast. If they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? You don't know. I don't know, that's war, but here's how you stop it. Stop attacking the crowd. Clapped, but the hosts fell silent, and that silence wasn't awkward. It was revealing. The show that lives for conflict had nothing to say. No counter, no smart retort, because he wasn't tossing opinions. He was laying bare how weak their talking points really were. He didn't ask anyone to pick a side, he asked for honesty, and when honesty entered the room, everything changed. The tension grew, but he didn't stop. He brought up one of the most controversial moments on The View, when one of their own was suspended over a comment the network didn't like. He didn't dodge it. He called the comment crazy, sure, but said she shouldn't have been pulled off air. That stunned everyone, because now he was defending someone he totally disagreed with. Not because he liked what she said, but because he believed in free speech, and that move that's rare, especially on a show known for cancel culture. He called out how ridiculous it was to tell a woman in her 60s to go reflect on the impact of her words. He dripped sarcasm, saying what impact there aren't. Neo-Nazis waiting for a signal from the lady on The View. He wasn't defending the statement. He was defending the freedom to speak without being treated like a misbehaving child, and in doing so he exposed The View as exactly what it says. Not a place where one wrong sentence gets you erased. His message was simple. Free speech is for the things we don't like, not just the ones we do. Then he zoomed out even further and took aim at a bigger illusion. The idea that today's media supports real freedom, he said. We don't need free speech when we're right, we need it when we're wrong. And that hit like a gut punch, he explained. Real freedom is being allowed to be wrong, to speak up even when it's unpopular, and he praised the show he was on, not The View, for being one of the last places where real conversation still lives, where you can challenge ideas without being burned for it. Then came the kicker. Have you ever seen that kind of open debate on The View? The answer? It was clear no one needed to say it. The audience already knew. Real disagreement, real. Dialogue doesn't exist there, because on The View, disagreement isn't just frowned upon, it's a threat. Say the wrong thing, and you're out-challenged the script, and you're silenced. And that's what he spotlighted, a show named The View that shuts down any other one. This wasn't just critique, it was exposure, raw and unfiltered. He went deeper, targeting the heart of what The View hides behind, smiling faces in rehearsed unity. He brought up the 2020 election, and how the media obsessed over racism and misogyny is the only reason for Trump's support. He tore that idea down, saying people weren't voting out of hate, they were voting for a better life. He said voters were struggling, they wanted stability, safety, something real, not slogans. And when Trump spoke to that, they listened, even if he was messy, and that truth cut deep, especially when he mentioned poor voters who supported Trump more than expected. Not all of them, but enough to matter. And he called out the arrogance in assuming that any working-class conservative voter must be hateful. He said, stats are stats, but a stat doesn't say I voted for Trump because I'm racist. And that kind of smugness, he warned, is why so many feel ignored and looked down on. And just like that, The View's carefully built narrative collapsed. Then came the moment that exposed more than just the panel. It exposed the whole media machine. He asked, what happens to people who just want to ask questions? What if someone disagrees, not from hate, but from personal experience? That's when the silence got louder. He described how left-leaning media has embraced one single script, and anything outside of it gets shoved away. Then he brought it full circle to the show's name. It's called The View, not the facts. He said with a grin, and the room deflated because he was right. He reminded everyone that Barbara Walters created The View to show real diversity of thought, but now it's one voice repeated in different outfits. Disagree, and you're a virus. He listed real examples, hosts, silenced guests, shouted down segments cut off, and more than anything, the pressure, the constant need to agree or pretend to agree, even when it feels fake. Then he asked the question no one on the panel would dare. What does that do to the audience? Millions watching, expecting real conversation, and instead they get the same take again and again. And if someone breaks the mold, they're laughed at, ignored, or met with silence, like when he talked about Israel or freedom of speech or voters without degrees. No one even argued. They just shut down. And that silence that wasn't confidence, it was fear. Fear of losing control, fear of what happens when people start thinking for themselves. He said it clearly, having a different opinion shouldn't make you an enemy. But we've turned it into that, and whether people agreed with him or not, they knew one thing. He tore the mask off. The View wasn't just exposed, it was stripped down. No smiles or applause could cover it anymore, and the truth was right there, refusing to shut up.